I was standing in my driveway at 6:43 in the morning, still in my work boots, coffee going cold in my hand, when my phone buzzed with a number I recognized but hadn't expected. Gerald Hoffman. Hoffman and Sons Fine Jewelry. Third generation. The man who'd sold me my wife's engagement ring 11 years ago. I almost let it go to voicemail. I was already running late for a job site in Overland Park, a 12-unit townhouse development that had been giving me headaches for 3 weeks straight. I had 2 concrete trucks scheduled to arrive by 7:15, a foreman who'd called in sick, and a building inspector who'd promised to show up sometime before noon, which in inspector speak meant anywhere between 9 and 3. But Gerald had never called me, not once in over a decade, not for sales, not for promotions, not for anything. The only communication I'd ever received from his shop was a Christmas card every December, the same elegant cream-colored card with the same gold lettering, thanking me for my business. So I answered. "Gerald," I said, "this is unexpected." "Marcus." His voice was tight, careful, the voice of a man choosing his words like he was walking through a minefield. "I need you to come to the store. Today, if you can." I checked my watch again. The concrete trucks weren't going to wait. "Gerald, I've got a pour this morning. Can this wait until—" "It can't wait." Something in his tone stopped me cold. I'd known Gerald for over a decade, and I'd never heard him sound like this. Gerald was calm. Gerald was measured. Gerald was the kind of man who could tell you a diamond was worthless while making you feel like you'd still made a wise investment. This wasn't that Gerald. "What's going on?" There was a long pause. Too long. The kind of pause that tells you someone is choosing their words like they're defusing a bomb. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, and in that breathing, I heard something I didn't want to name. "Your wife came in yesterday afternoon," he said finally. "She wanted to sell a ring, an engagement ring. She said it was a family heirloom she'd inherited. Said her aunt had passed." My hand tightened on the phone. The coffee cup trembled slightly, and I set it down on the hood of my truck before I dropped it. "Okay," I said slowly. "And?" "Marcus, I've been in this business for 38 years. My father was in it for 40 before that. My grandfather started this shop in 1952, back when the plaza was still just a dream. I've seen every kind of stone, every kind of setting, every kind of story people tell when they walk through my door. I know the difference between a 2-carat VS1 E-color diamond and a well-cut piece of cubic zirconia. I know it the way you know the difference between good concrete and bad concrete. It's in my bones." My heart started beating in a place it shouldn't have, somewhere behind my eyes, pounding against my skull like it was trying to escape. "What are you telling me, Gerald?" "The ring your wife brought in is fake, Marcus. It's not just low quality. It's not a lesser stone that she's trying to pass off as something better. It's not real. It's a synthetic stone in a plated setting, worth maybe $200 on a generous day. Maybe less if the buyer knows what they're looking at." I couldn't speak. The words hung in the air between us, traveling through cell towers and radio waves, and I couldn't make sense of them. They were just sounds, just syllables. They didn't connect to anything real. "But here's the thing," Gerald continued, his voice dropping lower, more urgent. "I pulled your file. I keep records of every significant sale, every custom piece, every special order. It's how we've stayed in business for 3 generations. I pulled your file, Marcus, and I remember that ring. I remember you. You came in on a Tuesday afternoon in January 2013. You were nervous. You kept wiping your palms on your jeans. You told me about a woman named Vanessa, and you told me you wanted something perfect for her. I remembered that day. I remembered every detail of it. You paid $63,000 for a natural diamond, Gerald said. Round brilliant cut, 2 carats, VS 1 clarity, E-color, set in platinum, custom band, hand engraved with your initials and hers. I have the receipt. I have the GIA certification. I have the insurance appraisal we did 6 months later when you upgraded your coverage. That stone was real, Marcus. That ring was real. I'd stake my reputation on it. Before I continue, you need to understand something about me. I'm not the kind of man who panics. I've been in construction for 24 years. I started hauling lumber when I was 19 years old, working for a contractor who paid me $8 an hour and taught me that the only thing that mattered was showing up on time and doing the job right. I worked my way up to foreman by 26, saved every penny I could, and started my own company at 31 with a used truck, a toolbox my father had left me, and exactly $4,000 in savings. That first year, I slept on job sites more than I slept in my apartment. I poured foundations in the summer heat, hung drywall in the winter cold, ran electrical when I had to because I couldn't afford to pay anyone else to do it. I learned every trade not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Because that's what survival looks like when you're building something from nothing. I've had contractors walk off jobs in the middle of a project. I've had suppliers go bankrupt 2 weeks before a delivery was supposed to arrive. I've had investors back out 3 days before a closing, leaving me scrambling to cover loans I'd already taken out. I've had employees steal from me, clients sue me, and partners betray me. I've learned to stay calm when everything around me is falling apart. It's not a skill you're born with. It's a skill you develop because the alternative is losing everything you've worked for. But this was my wife. The woman who'd slept next to me for 12 years. The woman I'd trusted with everything. My home, my business, my future, my heart. The woman who'd held my hand at my mother's funeral and told me everything would be okay. And Gerald Hoffman was telling me she'd walked into his store with a fake ring, trying to sell it as if I wouldn't notice. "Marcus, are you still there?" "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, distant, like it was coming from somewhere else. "I'm here." I didn't sell it to her. I told her I needed to verify the paperwork first, that there were procedures I had to follow for estate pieces, that I'd call her back within 48 hours. She seemed nervous when I said that. She kept looking at the door like she expected someone to walk in. She left in a hurry. He paused. "I thought you should know before I called her back." "Thank you, Gerald. There's one more thing." "What?" When she handed me the ring, she wasn't wearing a wedding band. I noticed because I always notice hands. It's an occupational habit. 38 years of examining fingers, you start to see things other people miss. But when I sold you that engagement ring, you bought a matching wedding band the same day. Platinum. Custom engraved, just like the engagement ring. I remember because you insisted they had to match perfectly. You said Vanessa deserved nothing less. I remembered that too. I remembered the look on her face when I slipped both rings on her finger at the altar. "Where's that ring, Marcus? The wedding band?" I didn't know. I realized, standing there in my driveway at 6:47 in the morning, the sun just starting to break over the rooftops, that I didn't know where my wife's wedding band was. I didn't know when she'd stopped wearing it. I didn't know if she'd been wearing it yesterday, or last week, or last month. I'd stopped looking. Somewhere along the way, in the chaos of running a company and managing employees and closing deals and putting out fires, I'd stopped looking at the woman I married. I'd stopped noticing the details. I'd assumed everything was fine because nothing seemed obviously wrong. And now Gerald Hoffman was telling me that everything was wrong, that it had probably been wrong for a very long time. "I'll be there by 10, I said. "I'll have the file ready. Everything. Receipts, certifications, appraisals, whatever you need." "Thank you, Gerald. I mean that." "I know you do." He hesitated. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I know this isn't the kind of phone call anyone wants to receive, but I've built my business on honesty. If I'd sold her that ring without telling you, I wouldn't have been able to look at myself in the mirror." "You did the right thing." "I hope so. I'll see you at 10. I hung up. The concrete trucks could wait. The job site could wait. Everything could wait. Because here's what Gerald didn't know yet. Here's what no one knew. That ring, the real one, the $63,000 one, had been appraised 3 times over the years. Once when we updated our homeowner's insurance, 6 months after the wedding. Once when we refinanced the house in 2018. And once, just 6 months ago, when Vanessa asked me to increase the jewelry coverage because prices have gone up so much, and I'd hate for us to be underinsured. I'd signed the paperwork myself. I'd looked at the numbers and nodded and trusted that my wife knew what she was talking about, because she always handled the household finances, and she was good at it. The appraisal value had been listed at $81,000. My wife hadn't just tried to sell a fake ring. She'd swapped it out first. She'd replaced a real diamond with a piece of glass, updated the insurance to reflect the higher value, and then walked into Gerald's store to sell the fake as if it were the original. And I was about to find out what else she'd been swapping. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a ring. This wasn't about jewelry or money or even betrayal. This was about everything I thought I knew. Everything I thought I'd built. Everything I thought was real. And none of it was. Let me tell you who I am. Not who I thought I was. Who I actually am. Because the story I'm about to tell you only makes sense if you understand where I came from, what I built, and why I trusted the woman who eventually tried to destroy me. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 47 years old. I was born in Independence, Missouri, in a 2-bedroom house that my father rented for his entire adult life. He never owned anything. Not the house, not a car worth more than $3,000. Not a single piece of property. He worked at a meatpacking plant for 31 years, came home every night smelling like blood and sawdust, and died at 54 from a heart attack in the break room during his lunch shift. They found him slumped over a ham sandwich he'd made that morning. My mother had packed it for him, same as she'd packed his lunch every day for 3 decades. He never got to finish it. My mother raised me and my 2 sisters on survivor's benefits and a cleaning job at a motel off I-70. The Sunset Inn, it was called. Though I never understood the name because you couldn't see the sunset from anywhere on the property. She worked 6 days a week, 51 weeks a year, and the only vacation she ever took was the week my father died. She taught me 2 things that stuck. Work harder than everyone else, and never trust anyone who says, "Don't worry about the details." I took both lessons to heart. I started working at 16, sweeping job sites after school for a contractor named Bill Moran. Bill was a hard man. Never smiled, never complimented anyone, never let a mistake slide. But he was fair, and he knew his trade, and he taught me more about construction in 2 years than most people learn in a decade. By the time I graduated high school, I knew I wasn't going to college. Not because I couldn't. My grades were good enough, and I'd even gotten a partial scholarship offer from a state school in Kansas. But I'd found something I was good at. something that made sense to me in a way that books and lectures never had. Building things, real things, things you could touch, walk through, live inside. There's something honest about construction. You can't fake a foundation. You can't pretend a wall is plumb when it isn't. The work is what it is, visible, measurable, undeniable. Either the building stands or it doesn't. I liked that. I still do. I got my contractor's license at 24, after working my way up from laborer to apprentice to journeyman to foreman. I saved every dollar I didn't absolutely need to spend, lived in a studio apartment the size of a closet, and drove a truck with 200,000 miles on it because it still ran, and that was all that mattered. I started web construction at 31 with that truck, a toolbox, and $4,000. My first project was a garage addition for a retired teacher in Blue Springs. I did the work myself. Foundation, framing, roofing, electrical, everything. It took me 6 weeks, and I made a profit of $800. But the teacher told her neighbor, and the neighbor told her coworker, and word got around. By the end of that first year, I had more work than I could handle alone. By year 3, I had 5 employees. By year 5, I had 12. Now, 16 years later, I have 32 employees, a fleet of 14 trucks, and contracts with 3 of the largest developers in the Kansas City metro area. We've built apartment complexes, shopping centers, medical offices, schools. Last year, we broke ground on a $50 million mixed-use development in the Crossroads district, the biggest project in the company's history. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you because you need to understand. I built everything I have with my hands. Every dollar, every asset, every piece of equipment. I earned it through 20 years of early mornings and late nights, through problems solved and obstacles overcome, through the kind of relentless effort that leaves calluses on your palms and aches in your joints. I earned it. And I thought I'd found someone who understood that. I met Vanessa in 2012 at a Chamber of Commerce mixer. It was a Thursday evening in September, the kind of event I usually avoided. I've never been good at small talk. I don't know how to work a room, how to make connections feel natural instead of transactional. But my accountant had been nagging me for months about networking, about visibility, about putting yourself out there, and I'd finally run out of excuses. The event was at a hotel ballroom in Overland Park. Maybe 200 people, all of them holding drinks and business cards and wearing the same practiced smiles. I lasted about 40 minutes before I retreated to a corner near the bar, nursing a beer and planning my escape. That's when I saw her. She was standing near the windows talking to a group of men in expensive suits. She was laughing at something one of them had said. But even from across the room, I could tell the laugh was performative. The kind of laugh you use when you want someone to feel clever without actually finding them funny. I noticed her because she was beautiful. Dark hair, sharp features, a presence that made you want to look twice. But what made me keep looking was something else. A quality I couldn't name then and still struggle to describe now. Confidence, maybe. Control, the sense that she knew exactly what she was doing, exactly what impression she was making, exactly how to navigate the room and the people in it. I was 41 years old, recently divorced, and not looking for anything. My first marriage had ended 2 years earlier, not dramatically, just sadly. Lisa and I had grown apart over a decade of marriage. She'd wanted a husband who was home for dinner every night, who took vacations and went to movies and lived a normal life. I was building a company. I was working 80-hour weeks. I was choosing the business over everything else. And eventually, she got tired of being the thing I didn't choose. The divorce was civil. We split everything fairly. I kept the business, she kept the house, and we both kept our dignity. We had a daughter together, Megan, who was 19 at the time and living in Chicago for college. She handled the divorce better than either of us did, probably because she'd seen it coming for years. Lisa and I still talked on holidays. We weren't friends exactly, but we weren't enemies either. We were just two people who'd tried something and failed, and were doing our best to move forward without making it worse. I wasn't looking for a new relationship. I wasn't looking for anything except another contract, another project, another reason to keep working. But Vanessa walked over to me. "You look like you're plotting your escape," she said. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "The way you're standing, the way you keep glancing at the exit. You've been checking your watch every 2 minutes since I started watching you." She smiled, not the performative smile she'd been using with the suits, but something smaller and more genuine. "I'm not judging. I've been plotting my own escape for the last hour." I laughed, surprising myself. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's doing the same thing. She extended her hand. "Vanessa Harrison. I work in commercial real estate marketing, which sounds more impressive than it is." I shook her hand. Her grip was firm, her palm cool and dry. "Marcus Webb. I'm in construction, which sounds less impressive than it is." She raised an eyebrow. "Webb Construction? You're the Marcus Webb?" "Depends on who's asking. I've heard good things. The Parkview Commons project? That was yours, right? The design build for the medical office complex?" I nodded, genuinely surprised. Parkview Commons wasn't a high-profile project. It wasn't the kind of thing people talked about at networking events. It was a solid, well-executed job that came in under budget and ahead of schedule, but it wasn't flashy. "You know your developments," I said. "It's my job to know." But honestly, I noticed because of how the project was handled. On time, no drama, no complaints from the tenants. That's rare in this industry. Most contractors cut corners. Yours didn't. I felt something warm in my chest. Not attraction, exactly, but recognition. Here was someone who understood what mattered, who saw the work, not just the results. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." I meant it. We talked for another hour. Then we left the event together and talked for 2 more at a coffee shop down the street. She was smart, genuinely smart, not just clever. She asked questions about my business, my employees, my plans for expansion, and she remembered the answers. She had opinions about zoning laws and construction timelines, and the difference between good contractors and great ones. By the end of the night, I'd asked for her number. By the end of the week, we'd had dinner twice. By the end of the month, I knew I was in trouble. Vanessa was different from Lisa in every way. Lisa had been warm, nurturing, domestic, the kind of woman who made a house feel like a home and worried about whether everyone was comfortable. Vanessa was sharp, ambitious, polished. She didn't worry about comfort. She created it through sheer force of personality. Where Lisa had wanted me to slow down, Vanessa seemed to understand why I couldn't. She never complained about late nights or canceled dinners. She never made me feel guilty for prioritizing the business. When I told her I had to work on a Saturday, she'd kiss me on the cheek and tell me to call her when I was free. "I didn't fall in love with a man who takes shortcuts," she said once, early in our relationship. "I fell in love with a man who builds things. That's who you are. Why would I try to change that?" I'd never heard anyone say anything like that to me before. We dated for 14 months before I proposed. I wanted to be sure. Not because I doubted my feelings, but because I'd been sure before, and I'd been wrong. I needed to know this was different. I needed to know she was different. She was patient. She never pushed. She let me take my time, let me work through my hesitations at my own pace. And when I was finally ready, she said yes without a moment's hesitation. I remember the night I bought the ring. It was a Tuesday in January, cold and gray. The kind of day that makes you want to stay inside and forget the world exists. But I'd made up my mind. And once I make up my mind, I don't wait. I'd gone to 3 different jewelers before I found Gerald Hoffman. The first 2 were in the plaza, high-end stores with aggressive salespeople and displays designed to make you feel inadequate. I walked out of both within 15 minutes. Gerald's store was different. Hoffman and Sons Fine Jewelry was tucked into a strip mall in Leawood, between a dry cleaner and a tax preparation office. The storefront was modest. No flashy signs, no dramatic lighting, just a simple nameplate and a window display that hadn't been updated since the Reagan administration. But the moment I walked in, I knew. No pressure, no pitch. Just an old man in a cardigan who looked at me like I was a human being, not a commission. "You look like a man on a mission," Gerald said. "I'm looking for an engagement ring." "Then you're in the right place. Sit down. Tell me about her." And I did. I told him everything. I told him how Vanessa made me laugh. Really laugh. The kind that comes from your gut and surprises you. I told him how she challenged me. How she made me think about things I'd never considered. How she had opinions on everything and wasn't afraid to share them. I told him how she'd said once that she admired people who built things, that there was something honest about it, something real. Gerald listened without interrupting. He nodded occasionally, made small sounds of acknowledgement, but mostly he just listened. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up, walked to a case behind the counter, and pulled out a single ring. "This is the one," he said. It was beautiful, simple, elegant, nothing ostentatious. A round, brilliant diamond in a platinum setting, classic and timeless. "How do you know?" I asked. "Because you just told me who she is. And this ring," he held it up to the light, letting the stone catch the fluorescent glow. "This ring is for a woman who knows her own worth. A woman who doesn't need flash or drama. A woman who wants something real." He was right. I paid $63,000 for that ring. It was more than I'd planned to spend. More than I'd spent on anything except my truck and my house. But I didn't hesitate. Because Vanessa deserved nothing less. We got married in April 2013. Small ceremony, 40 people at a garden venue in Luce Park. Vanessa hadn't wanted anything big, said she'd rather put the money toward the future, toward something that would last longer than a party. That was one of the things I loved about her. She was practical, sensible. She understood that a wedding was one day, but a life was decades. We bought a house in Prairie Village 6 months later. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a backyard big enough for the dog she wanted, and the garden she'd been dreaming about. Red brick, white shutters, a porch where we could sit on summer evenings and watch the sun go down. I paid cash. The whole thing. $340,000 from the business account, transferred to escrow without a mortgage, without a lien, without any strings attached. Vanessa cried when I handed her the keys. She wrapped her arms around me and buried her face in my chest and told me I'd given her something she never thought she'd have. Security. "I grew up with nothing," she said. "We moved every year because we couldn't make rent. I've never lived anywhere that felt permanent. And now..." She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I held her tighter and promised myself I'd never let her feel insecure again. I'd build us a life so solid, so stable, so real, that nothing could shake it. That was the promise I made. That was the promise I broke. Not by failing her, but by trusting her. By believing the story she told me about who she was and what she wanted. By assuming that the woman I held in my arms was the same woman I'd married. She wasn't. She never had been. For the first few years, everything seemed good. Vanessa quit her marketing job to focus on us, her word. She said she wanted to build our life together, to create something meaningful instead of just working for a paycheck. I supported the decision. I made enough for both of us, and she had ideas about how to improve things. The house, the yard, our social standing in the community. She joined the junior league. She volunteered at the children's hospital, organizing fundraisers and charity events. She became the kind of wife who knew everyone's name at every party, who could work a room better than anyone I'd ever seen. People liked her. They respected her. They told me how lucky I was, what a catch she was, how she'd transformed me from a workaholic hermit into an actual member of society. I was proud of her. I was proud of us. I thought we'd built something real. But here's the thing about building. You have to pay attention to the foundation. You have to watch for cracks, for settling, for signs that something underneath isn't holding the weight it's supposed to hold. I didn't watch. I was too busy. The company was growing faster than I'd ever imagined, and I was running to keep up. Every year brought new projects, new challenges, new demands on my time and attention. I stopped coming home for dinner. I stopped noticing when Vanessa changed her hair, or bought a new dress, or seemed quieter than usual. I assumed everything was fine because she never complained, never pushed back, never gave me any reason to think otherwise. She was always smiling when I walked through the door. Always supportive, always understanding, always the perfect wife. I should have wondered why. The first anomaly came about 3 years into the marriage. Vanessa's cousin Derek moved to town. I'd never heard of him before. Vanessa had mentioned family here and there. A sister in Texas she hadn't spoken to in years. Parents who'd passed when she was young. An aunt who'd raised her. But Derek was new. He materialized out of nowhere. A name she'd never spoken suddenly appearing in our lives like he'd always been there. She said he was starting a business. Some kind of estate liquidation service, helping families sort through belongings after deaths or downsizing. He needed a place to stay while he got established. Just for a few months, she said. He's family, Marcus. It's the right thing to do. I didn't argue. Family was important to me. I'd have done anything for my sisters. So I understood the impulse, the obligation, the pull of blood ties. If Vanessa had family that needed help, I wasn't going to stand in the way. Derek moved into our guest room on a Tuesday in October 2016. He stayed for 7 weeks. I didn't like him. That's the honest truth. There was something slippery about Derek. The way he smiled too easily, laughed too loud at things that weren't funny, always seemed to be watching without appearing to watch. He had soft hands, I noticed. Soft and uncalloused. The hands of a man who'd never held a hammer or carried a load or done a day of real work in his life. Not that there's anything wrong with soft hands. Plenty of good people work with their minds instead of their bodies, but Derek's hands bothered me in a way I couldn't articulate. They felt like a symbol of something, a sign that he was comfortable letting other people do the hard work while he reaped the benefits. But I kept my mouth shut. Vanessa seemed happy to have him around, and I was busy. We'd just landed a contract for a 60-unit apartment complex in Liberty, the biggest project in the company's history at that point. I was working 14-hour days, barely home long enough to shower and sleep. By the time Derek left, I'd almost forgotten he was there. Almost, because one night, about 2 weeks before he moved out, I came home late, past midnight, and saw his car in the driveway. Vanessa's car was there too, parked at an angle, like she'd pulled in fast without bothering to straighten out. The house was dark, except for a light in the kitchen. I walked in quietly, not wanting to wake anyone if they'd already gone to bed. But when I passed the kitchen doorway, I heard voices. Low, hushed. The kind of voices people use when they don't want to be overheard. I stopped. "Can't push this," Vanessa was saying. "He's not stupid." "He's not paying attention either," Derek replied. "You said so yourself. He's never home. He doesn't notice anything." "That doesn't mean—" "Vanessa." Derek's voice dropped lower, softer, almost intimate. "Trust me. I've done this before. The ones who work all the time are the easiest. They want to believe everything's fine, so they do. They don't look because they don't want to see." I cleared my throat. They both turned. Vanessa's face shifted. Just for a second. Just a flicker of something I couldn't name. And then she smiled. That warm, familiar smile that had made me fall in love with her. "You're home," she said. "I didn't hear you pull in." "Late pour," I said. "The concrete truck was delayed. What are you two doing up?" "Derek was just telling me about a client. Someone looking to sell a whole estate, furniture, jewelry, artwork, everything. He wanted my opinion on pricing. I used to work in marketing for real estate, remember? I know a little about appraisals." Derek nodded, that slippery smile sliding into place like a mask. "Your wife has a good eye. Better than most appraisers I've worked with." I looked at both of them. Something felt off, wrong, like a foundation that hadn't been poured level, but I couldn't name it. I was exhausted. I'd been on my feet since 5 in the morning, and every muscle in my body was screaming for rest. "Don't stay up too late," I said. I went upstairs, I showered, I fell into bed and was asleep within minutes. I didn't think about that conversation again for 5 years. That was my first mistake. The second anomaly came in 2021. We'd been married 8 years. Vanessa had become genuinely active in local philanthropy, or so I thought. She chaired a gala for the Children's Hospital, organized silent auctions, raised real money for real causes. People respected her. People thanked her. People told me over and over what a wonderful wife I had. I believed them. Why wouldn't I? But that summer, something changed. It started with the jewelry. Vanessa had always liked nice things. I didn't mind. I could afford it, and she had good taste. Over the years, I'd bought her pieces for anniversaries, birthdays, Christmas, every occasion that warranted a gift and some that didn't. A diamond pendant for our 5th anniversary. Ruby earrings for her 40th birthday. A Cartier bracelet one Christmas because she'd mentioned loving it in a magazine and I wanted to surprise her. A sapphire necklace on our 8th anniversary because the store clerk said sapphires represented loyalty. I kept records of everything. Receipts, appraisals, photos for insurance purposes. It was habit, the same habit that made me document every change order on a construction project, every variation from the original plan. You don't build a successful business without learning to keep track of things. One afternoon in July 2021, I was looking for a receipt for a work-related purchase, a generator we'd bought for a job site, and pulled down the wrong folder from my office shelf. It was the insurance folder, the one with all our personal coverage documents. I flipped through it idly, not really looking for anything specific, and noticed something strange. The jewelry rider was gone. Not the whole policy, just the rider. The separate coverage we'd added years ago to cover Vanessa's more valuable pieces. I'd set it up after the Cartier bracelet purchase, wanting to make sure everything was protected in case of theft or loss. The rider covered everything: the engagement ring, the pendant, the earrings, the bracelet, the necklace. Total value at the time had been around $150,000. But the rider wasn't in the folder. And when I checked the current policy documents, it wasn't listed there either. I called our insurance agent the next morning. "Oh, Mrs. Webb canceled that rider last year," he said, cheerful and unsuspecting. "Said you were consolidating coverage, simplifying things. She handled it all over the phone. Very efficient." "She canceled it?" "Yeah, in March 2020, right before the renewal date. She said you'd discussed it together and decided the separate rider wasn't necessary. Something about keeping all your coverage under one umbrella policy instead of having multiple riders. We hadn't discussed anything. I hadn't even known the rider could be canceled without my signature. But apparently, since Vanessa was listed as a co-insured on the policy, she had the authority to make changes. I didn't say any of this to the agent. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in my office for a long time, staring at the wall. Why would Vanessa cancel jewelry insurance? The only reason I could think of was if the jewelry wasn't worth insuring anymore. If something had happened to it. If it wasn't there. But that didn't make sense either. I'd seen her wearing the pendant just last week. The earrings were in her jewelry box. I'd noticed them when I was looking for cufflinks the other morning. Or were they? I'd noticed something in her jewelry box. I'd assumed they were the earrings. But had I actually looked closely? Had I compared them to the originals? Had I checked the weight, the sparkle, the way the stones caught the light? Number one, I hadn't. Because why would I? Why would anyone? That night, I watched Vanessa more carefully than I had in years. She was wearing the pendant at dinner, or something that looked like the pendant. She laughed at something I said, reached across the table to touch my hand. "You seem distracted," she said. "Everything okay at work?" "Fine," I said. "Just thinking about a project." She smiled, that warm, familiar smile. I smiled back, but something had cracked. Something small, almost invisible, like a hairline fracture in a foundation. The kind of crack that doesn't seem like much at first, but grows over time, spreading and deepening until one day the whole structure gives way. I didn't pursue it. I told myself I was being paranoid. Work stress, midlife anxiety. The canceled insurance rider was probably just a miscommunication, something I'd agreed to and forgotten. I let it go. That was my second mistake. Now you understand where I was when Gerald Hoffman called me that January morning. 12 years into a marriage. Successful business, beautiful home, a wife everyone admired, a life that looked perfect from the outside, and felt perfect too, most of the time, and a fake ring in a jeweler's shop that should have been real. I didn't go straight to Gerald's store after we hung up. First, I went home. Vanessa had left for her Thursday morning yoga class at 6:30, like she did every Tuesday and Thursday. She wouldn't be back until at least 10, sometimes 10:30 if she stopped for coffee afterward. I had time. I walked through our house like I was casing a crime scene. I'd built this life. I knew every room, every closet, every drawer. But I was seeing it differently now, not as a home, but as evidence. I started in the bedroom. Vanessa's jewelry box was on her vanity, a large mahogany case I'd bought her for our 3rd anniversary. It had a velvet interior and multiple compartments, each one designed to hold different types of pieces. I opened it slowly, almost reverently. Everything was there. Necklaces, bracelets, earrings, organized neatly, the way Vanessa organized everything. I picked up the ruby earrings, held them to the light. They looked right. The color was right. The setting was right. But I didn't know anymore. I'd never learned to tell the difference between real stones and fake ones. That wasn't my area of expertise. I built buildings, not jewelry. I could tell you if a foundation was level or a wall was plumb. But a ruby? A diamond? I couldn't say with any certainty whether what I was holding was worth $10 or $10,000. I set the earrings down carefully and moved to her nightstand. A book. Some literary novel I didn't recognize. A bottle of lotion. A phone charger. Nothing unusual. I checked the closet. Clothes, shoes, handbags. Expensive, all of it, but nothing that seemed out of place. Then I noticed the drawer. Her dresser had 5 drawers. The top one, the small one meant for accessories, had a lock on it. I'd asked her about it once, years ago, soon after we moved into the house. Just personal stuff, she'd said. Old letters from friends, some things from my parents. Sentimental stuff I don't want to lose. Nothing exciting. I'd never pushed. Everyone was entitled to privacy. Everyone had things they wanted to keep for themselves. Now I picked the lock with a paperclip. It took me 30 seconds. Inside, I found a stack of papers. Bank statements, credit card statements, receipts. But not from any bank I recognized. Not from any credit card with my name on it. The account was under V.L. Harrison. Vanessa Louise Harrison. Her maiden name. The name she'd had before she became my wife. I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed where I'd slept next to her for 12 years, where we'd talked and laughed and made love and planned our future. And I started reading. The account had a current balance of $247,000. The deposits were irregular, sometimes a few thousand, sometimes 10 or 15, occasionally more. Going back years, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 5 years of deposits, 5 years of money coming from somewhere. Where? I looked at the credit card statements. The card was linked to the same account. The charges were interesting. Storage unit rental, Secure Space LLC, monthly, since March 2018. Safe deposit box, Prairie Trust Bank, annual fee, renewed each January. Shipping costs, FedEx, UPS, various amounts, going to addresses in Phoenix, Miami, Denver, cash advances, irregular amounts, various dates. At the bottom of the drawer, underneath everything else, I found a small envelope. Inside was a key. No label, no note. Just a silver key, standard-looking, the kind that might open a locker or a storage unit or a safe deposit box. I took photos of everything with my phone. Every document, every statement, every receipt. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Same order, same positions, same wrinkles in the paper, and relocked the drawer. I stood up. I walked to the window. I looked out at the backyard, the yard where Vanessa had planted roses and hydrangeas and tomatoes, the yard where we'd hosted barbecues and birthday parties and holiday gatherings. And I understood, finally, what had been happening in my house for the past 5 years. This wasn't just about a ring. This was about everything. I pulled into Hoffman and Sons Fine Jewelry at 9:47, 13 minutes early. Gerald was waiting. He stood behind the counter in his usual cardigan. This one was brown, with leather patches on the elbows, and his expression was grave. He looked older than I remembered, his hair thinner, his face more lined. But his eyes were sharp and clear, the same eyes that had picked out that perfect ring 11 years ago. "Marcus," he said, "come in the back." His office was small, cluttered with paperwork and jewelry tools and display cases that had seen better days. The walls were covered with photographs, Gerald with various customers, Gerald with his father and grandfather, Gerald at industry events and trade shows. A life in jewelry, documented in faded snapshots. He had a file on his desk, thick, labeled with my name and the date of my original purchase. "Tell me everything," I said. "Don't leave anything out." He did. Vanessa had come in at 2:15 the previous afternoon. She'd been dressed casually. Yoga pants, a light jacket, hair pulled back in a ponytail. No makeup that Gerald could see, which he noted as unusual because women who own fine jewelry usually dress up when they're trying to sell it. She'd introduced herself as Victoria Harrison, not Vanessa Webb. She'd said she was selling a family heirloom, an engagement ring from a deceased aunt who'd never married. The aunt had left her the piece in her will, and she was looking to convert it to cash. She had a story ready, Gerald said. Practiced, every detail in place. The aunt's name, Margaret. The city where she'd lived, Cincinnati. The year she'd passed, 2022. But the story didn't match the ring. "What do you mean?" Gerald reached under his desk and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it and set it on the desk between us. There it was, a ring that looked exactly like the one I'd bought. Same cut, same setting, same platinum band. If you'd shown me this ring and told me it was mine, I would have believed you. But it wasn't mine. Gerald handed me a jeweler's loupe. "Look." I held the ring up to the light and peered through the loupe. The stone was beautiful, brilliant, sparkling, flawless. Too flawless. "See how perfect it is?" Gerald said. "No inclusions, no natural imperfections, no characteristics. A natural diamond always has something. A tiny cloud, a pinpoint, a feather. Something that makes it unique. This stone has nothing. It's too clean, too perfect. That's how you know it's synthetic." I set down the loupe. "CZ?" I asked. "Cubic zirconia. High quality, but synthetic. Worth maybe $50 for the stone itself. $100 if you're generous. The setting is plated. Looks like platinum, but it's base metal underneath with a thin coating. Total value, $200 at best. $300 if you found a buyer who didn't know what they were looking at." "How long would it take to make a copy like this?" "If you have the original? A week, maybe 10 days. Less if you pay rush fees. There are shops that specialize in this kind of work, usually for insurance purposes, supposedly. You send them a piece, they make an exact replica. You keep the replica in your jewelry box and put the original in a safe or a vault. That's the legitimate use. The illegitimate use is what my wife was doing." "Yes." I stared at the ring, this piece of glass and plated metal that had been masquerading as something precious. "How many times has she been here, Gerald?" He hesitated. "Gerald." This was the first time she tried to sell anything, but she's been in before. 3 times over the last 2 years. 3 times? She said she was looking for anniversary gifts. For you. She'd come in, browse the cases, ask questions. She spent about 20 minutes each time, and she asked very specific questions. How do appraisals work? What documentation is required for insurance claims? How resale values are determined? How to verify authenticity? She was researching. That's exactly what I think. Gerald leaned back in his chair, his face grim. I've been in this business a long time, Marcus. I've seen people try to pass off fake pieces as real. I've seen insurance fraud, estate fraud, divorce fraud. But I've never seen anything quite like this. Your wife didn't just swap out one ring. She's been building a system, learning the industry, understanding the vulnerabilities, figuring out how to exploit them. I sat there, in Gerald's cluttered office, surrounded by photographs of happier customers and memories of better times, and I felt something harden inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Anger was too hot, too uncontrolled. What I felt was colder than that, a kind of crystalline clarity, like the world had suddenly come into focus after years of blur. Gerald, I need to ask you a favor. Name it. Keep that ring. Don't sell it to anyone. Don't return it to my wife. Don't do anything with it until I tell you otherwise. Can you do that? Of course. But Marcus, what are you going to do? I stood up. I'm going to find out exactly what she's taken from me. And then I'm going to make sure she never takes anything from anyone again. Gerald gave me the ring and a phone number. Call this woman, he said, writing on the back of his business card. Brenda Costello. She's a private investigator. Used to work fraud cases for insurance companies before she went independent. If anyone can tell you what your wife's been doing, it's her. I thanked him and left. I sat in my truck for 15 minutes before I called. Not because I was hesitant, but because I needed to think. Needed to organize my thoughts. Needed to approach this the same way I'd approach a construction project. Systematically, methodically, one step at a time. Brenda answered on the second ring. Costello Investigations. My name is Marcus Webb. Gerald Hoffman gave me your number. Gerald. Her voice warmed slightly, the warmth of professional respect. Good man. Honest as they come. What's the situation? I told her everything. The ring, the fake, the hidden bank account, the storage unit charges, the safe deposit box, the key. I kept it factual, clinical, like I was describing a problem on a job site to a foreman. When I finished, there was a long pause. Mr. Webb, she said finally, how soon can you meet? Today. Good. My office is on Warnall Road, south of the plaza. Can you be here by noon? I'll be there. And Mr. Webb? Don't do anything else. Don't confront your wife, don't search the house again, don't tip her off in any way. We need to approach this carefully. I understand. Do you? Because most husbands in your position want to tear the house apart. They want answers right now, consequences right now, justice right now. That approach doesn't work. It just gives the other party time to cover their tracks. I've built a construction company from nothing, I said. I know how to be patient. I know how to plan. And I know how to execute. Another pause. When she spoke again, there was a note of approval in her voice. Good. I'll see you at noon. Brenda Costello was not what I expected. I'd imagined a private investigator would be, I don't know, dramatic maybe. Someone who looked like they'd stepped out of a noir film, all trench coats and cigarette smoke and hard-boiled dialogue. Brenda was none of those things. She was in her early 60s, compact and sturdy, with silver hair cut short and practical. She wore a simple blouse and slacks, sensible shoes, no jewelry except a wedding ring that looked like it had been on her finger for decades. Her office was sparse. A desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and a wall covered with licenses, certifications, and photographs of what I assumed were successful cases. She shook my hand firmly, no softness there, and gestured to a chair. Tell me again, she said, sitting down across from me. Everything, from the beginning. Don't leave anything out, even the things that seem unimportant. So I told her everything. The meeting at the Chamber of Commerce mixer, the courtship, the wedding, the house, the cousin Derek and his soft hands, the canceled insurance rider, the bank statements, and the key. She listened without interrupting, making notes on a yellow legal pad in handwriting that was small and precise. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me with eyes that had seen things I couldn't imagine. How much do you know about your wife's life before you met her? What she told me. Parents died when she was young. A car accident, I think. Raised by an aunt. Worked in marketing before we got married. Had a sister she wasn't close to. Did you verify any of that? I stared at her. No. Why would I? I trusted her. Because people lie, Mr. Webb, especially people who are good at it. She pulled a folder from her desk drawer, already prepared, which told me Gerald had called her before I did. I did some preliminary work this morning after Gerald reached out. Basic background check, the kind any employer might do. Your wife's maiden name is Harrison, correct? Vanessa Louise Harrison? Yes. There's no record of a Vanessa Louise Harrison born in the United States between 1975 and 1985. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. No birth certificate, Brenda continued. No social security record. No school enrollment records. No driver's license history. No voting registration. Nothing from before 2008. That's not possible. It's possible if Vanessa Louise Harrison is a constructed identity, created sometime before you met her, good enough to pass a casual background check, but not a deep investigation. Who is she then? Brenda spread her hands. That's what we're going to find out. Brenda laid out a plan, methodical, systematic, step by step, like a construction project. First, we needed to identify the storage unit. The credit card statements I'd photographed showed monthly charges to Secure Space, LLC. There were 4 Secure Space locations in the Kansas City metro area. Brenda would check each one for accounts under Vanessa's name, or any of her possible aliases. Second, the safe deposit box. The annual fee was charged through Prairie Trust Bank, a small local institution with 2 branches. Brenda had contacts there who might be able to provide information without triggering any alerts. Third, the key. It was unmarked, standard-looking. Could open a storage unit, a safe deposit box, a mailbox rental, any number of things. We'd know more once we identified where it belonged. Fourth, the shipping charges. The credit card statements showed multiple payments to FedEx and UPS, sending packages to addresses in Phoenix, Miami, and Denver. Someone was receiving those packages. Finding out who might tell us more about the network Vanessa was operating within. Fifth, Derek. The cousin who wasn't really a cousin. I need to find him, I said. What do you know about him? Almost nothing. Vanessa said he ran an estate liquidation business. He stayed with us for about 7 weeks in 2016, then moved out. I haven't seen him since. Last name? I paused, searching my memory. Had Vanessa ever told me Derek's last name? Had I ever asked? I don't know. She just called him Derek. I never asked for more. Brenda wrote something down. Estate liquidation. That's convenient. It's a cash-heavy business, hard to trace, and it gives you access to valuable items before they hit the open market. You think they were working together? I think the timing is suggestive. He shows up, stays long enough to establish himself as a family member, leaves, and a couple years later, your wife starts making moves you don't notice. I thought about that night in the kitchen. The hushed conversation. Derek's voice, low and confident. The ones who work all the time are the easiest. They don't look because they don't want to see. He'd been right. I hadn't wanted to see, and so I hadn't. I need proof, I said. Not theories, not suspicions, proof. Something I can take to a lawyer, something that will hold up. Brenda smiled. It was a thin, professional smile, the smile of someone who'd heard that request 1,000 times. That's exactly what we're going to get. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived 2 lives. In one life, I was Marcus Webb, husband, business owner, pillar of the community. I went to work, managed my crews, attended bid meetings, signed contracts. I had dinner with Vanessa, watched television with her, made small talk about her charity events and my construction projects. In the other life, I was building a case. It was like running a parallel construction project. Secret, hidden, documented only in files that I kept locked in a safe at my office. Every day, Brenda sent me updates. Every night, I reviewed them, looking for patterns, connections, evidence I could use. The picture that emerged was worse than I'd imagined. The storage unit was the first breakthrough. Secure Space LLC had 4 facilities in the metro area. Brenda checked all of them. Only one had an account under V. Harrison. The location on 87th Street, in an industrial part of Lenexa, Unit 247, rented since March 2018. Can we get in? I asked when she called with the news. Not legally. The unit is in her name, not yours. Without a court order or her permission, we can't enter. What about security footage? That's trickier. Secure Space keeps footage for 60 days, then overwrites it unless there's a reason to flag it. But I have a contact who works there, someone who owes me from a previous case. Can they help? They can tell us what they've seen, and they might be able to pull footage. The contact's name was Ray. He was a night shift manager at the 87th Street facility, bored and underpaid, and apparently grateful to Brenda for helping him with a custody dispute a few years back. 3 days after Brenda reached out, Ray called with information. Unit 247 is active, he said. I was listening on speaker in Brenda's office, taking notes. Monthly access, sometimes twice a month. The renter usually comes alone, drives a silver Toyota SUV. I ran the plates, and they're registered to someone named V. Harrison at an address in Prairie Village. Vanessa's car, Vanessa's address. Any cameras? Brenda asked. Yeah, we've got cameras at the gate, in the hallways, and at the elevator. Quality's not great, but you can see faces if you know what you're looking for. I pulled the last 2 months of footage like you asked. There's something interesting. What? She's not always alone. About 3 weeks ago, someone met her at the unit. A guy. Tall, thin, wearing a baseball cap. They talked for a few minutes, exchanged something, looked like a bag for an envelope, then hugged and left separately. I felt my pulse quicken. What did the guy look like? Couldn't see his face clearly because of the cap, but he was tall, kind of soft-looking, you know? Not athletic. He drove a gray sedan. Didn't get the plates, but I could try to enhance the footage if you need it. I didn't need to enhance the footage. I already knew who it was. Derek. The footage arrived 2 days later on a USB drive. Brenda and I watched it together in her office, hunched over her computer screen. The video quality was grainy, like Ray had warned, but good enough to see what mattered. Clip 1. Vanessa's Toyota pulling up to the secure space gate. She leaned out, punched in a code, waited for the arm to lift. Her face was clearly visible in the morning light. Clip 2. Vanessa walking down a hallway on the 2nd floor, carrying a cardboard box. She stopped at Unit 247, fumbled with a key, opened the rolling door. She stepped inside, and the camera angle shifted, showing only the closed door. Clip 3. Vanessa emerging 23 minutes later, no box in her hands. She locked the door, checked both directions like she was making sure she wasn't being watched, and walked back toward the elevator. Clip 4. This was the one that mattered. Vanessa at Unit 247 again, but this time she wasn't alone. A man was waiting for her, tall, thin, wearing jeans and a baseball cap pulled low. When she approached, he turned toward her, and for just a moment, his face caught the overhead light. Derek. I recognized him instantly, despite the years. The same soft features, the same slippery posture, the same sense of watching without appearing to watch. They talked for several minutes, too quiet for the camera to pick up audio. Then Derek reached into a bag, one of those insulated grocery bags, and pulled something out. Something small, wrapped in cloth. He handed it to Vanessa. She unwrapped it, examined it briefly, nodded. Then she reached into her purse and handed him an envelope. Thick, white, the kind that might hold cash. They hugged. Not a quick, familial hug. Something longer, more intimate. Her arms around his neck, his hands on her waist. Then they separated and left in different directions. I watched the clip 3 times, memorizing every detail. That's him, I said finally. Derek. The cousin. Brenda nodded. Doesn't look like a cousin to me. No, it doesn't. I'll run facial recognition. If he has a record, we'll find him. And if he doesn't, then we dig deeper. Everyone leaves a trail. You just have to know where to look. While Brenda tracked Derek, I focused on the safe deposit box. Prairie Trust Bank had 2 branches. The main one was in Westport, near the Art District, a restored brick building that looked like it had been there since the 1920s. The secondary branch was in North Kansas City, smaller and quieter, the kind of place where people went specifically because they didn't want to be noticed. Brenda's contact at the bank was a woman named Doris, a senior teller who'd been there for more than 2 decades. She couldn't give us direct access to the box. That would require a court order or proof of criminal activity, but she could confirm certain things. Box 814, Doris told Brenda over the phone. I was listening on speaker, taking more notes. Rented to V.L. Harrison since January 2019. Accessed about once a month, sometimes more frequently. The renter always comes alone. What's the size of the box? Medium. Big enough for documents, jewelry, some cash. Not big enough for anything bulky. Any idea what's inside? We don't inspect contents unless there's a warrant or a safety concern. But I can tell you this. The renter pays the annual fee in cash. Always has. That's unusual. Most people just have it debited from an account. Cash. Untraceable. Another dead end, at least for now. One more thing, Doris said. There's a cosigner on the box. I leaned forward. Who? A man named Derek Pruitt. Derek Pruitt. Now I had a last name. Brenda ran him the same day. The results came back by evening. Derek Eugene Pruitt, 41 years old. Born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Multiple addresses over the past 15 years. Tulsa, Dallas, Phoenix, Denver, and finally Kansas City. He'd moved around a lot, never staying anywhere for more than a couple of years. Employment history. Sparse. A few stints at various retail jobs, nothing lasting. No visible means of significant income, yet he'd managed to pay rent consistently in increasingly expensive cities. Criminal record. That's where things got interesting. 2 counts of felony fraud in Texas, 2009. He'd been running a fake estate sale operation, soliciting items from grieving families, promising to sell them for fair prices, then pocketing the proceeds and delivering a fraction of the actual value. Classic confidence scheme. He'd been convicted, served 18 months at a state facility, and been released on parole in 2011. But here's the part that made my blood run cold. His accomplice on the Texas fraud charges, the person who'd helped him target victims and build the operation, was a woman named Victoria Lynn Pruitt. His sister, Victoria Lynn Pruitt. I read the name again, trying to make the pieces fit. Vanessa's maiden name was Harrison. Victoria's maiden name was Pruitt. They weren't the same person, but Brenda had already told me. Vanessa Louise Harrison didn't exist before 2008. What if Victoria Pruitt had become Vanessa Harrison? What if the woman I married was a convicted fraudster who'd changed her name, built a new identity, and targeted me from the beginning? I called Brenda immediately. "I need more information on Victoria Pruitt," I said. "Everything you can find. Criminal record, known associates, last known address, all of it." "Already working on it. But Marcus, there's something else you should know." "What?" "I found Derek Pruitt's current address. He's living in Kansas City. Has been for at least 3 years." "Where?" 4412 Woodland Avenue. It's the same address that showed up on some of those shipping labels in Vanessa's statements. She's been sending packages to him for years. I sat down heavily in my office chair. For years. This had been going on for years, right under my nose, right in my own city, and I'd never known. I'd never even suspected. "What do you want to do?" Brenda asked. I thought about it. I could confront them. Go to Derek's door, demand answers. Go home to Vanessa, throw the evidence on the table, watch her face as she realized she'd been caught. But that wouldn't work. Vanessa was smart. She'd covered her tracks for years, built a system so careful and methodical that I never noticed a thing. If I tipped my hand too early, she'd destroy evidence, move money, disappear. Derek would vanish. The whole network would scatter, and I'd be left with nothing but a fake ring and a broken marriage. I needed to see everything first. I needed to understand the full scope of what she'd done, what she'd taken, what she was still planning. "Keep digging," I said. "I want to know every account, every asset, every connection. I want to know exactly how deep this goes." "That's going to take time and money. This kind of investigation isn't cheap." "I don't care about the money. I care about the truth." "All right. I'll keep you posted." The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. Every morning, I woke up next to a woman I didn't know. A woman who'd lied to me from the moment we met. About her name, her past, her family, everything. A woman who'd been systematically stealing from me while I worked myself to exhaustion. While I built a company and a life that I thought we were building together. Every evening, I sat across from her at dinner, watching her smile, listening to her talk about her yoga class and her charity events, and I wondered how much of it was real. How much of anything had ever been real. I stayed calm. I needed proof. That became my mantra. Every time I wanted to scream, every time I wanted to grab her shoulders and shake the truth out of her, I repeated those words in my head. Stay calm. Get proof. Stay calm. Get proof. Meanwhile, Brenda was uncovering a machine. The first major discovery came in week 2. Brenda had found Victoria Pruitt's criminal record, and it was worse than Derek's. Victoria Lynn Pruitt, born 1979 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Arrested in 2008 for felony fraud, conspiracy, and theft by deception. She'd been running a romance scam, targeting wealthy men through online dating sites, building relationships over months, then convincing them to invest in fake business opportunities. When the money dried up, she'd move on to the next victim. Total estimated take from multiple victims, over $2 million. She'd been convicted, served 2 years in federal prison, and been released in 2012. 1 year before I met Vanessa at the Chamber of Commerce mixer. The timeline fit perfectly. Victoria Pruitt gets out of prison in 2012. She needs a new identity, a fresh start, a way to continue doing what she does best. She becomes Vanessa Harrison. New name, new history, new look. She targets a successful businessman with a track record of hard work and honest dealing. Someone who would trust her. Someone who wouldn't look too closely. Someone like me. The second major discovery was financial. Brenda had traced the deposits in Vanessa's hidden account. Most of them came from cash, impossible to track. But some came from wire transfers, and wire transfers leave a trail. The transfers originated from an account in Phoenix, held by a company called Southwest Estate Services, LLC. Registered agent, Derek Pruitt. It was a shell company, minimal activity, no real employees, just a name on paper that could move money from one place to another without raising questions. The money flowed from Southwest Estate Services to V.L. Harrison's hidden account, then presumably to cash or other untraceable assets. But where was Southwest Estate Services getting its money? Brenda dug deeper. She found invoices, shipping records, sales receipts. The company was selling jewelry, high-end pieces, the kind that usually came with certifications and appraisals. Diamonds, rubies, sapphires, gold settings, platinum bands. The same kinds of pieces I'd bought for Vanessa over the years. The picture was becoming clearer. Vanessa was swapping my jewelry for fakes, sending the originals to Derek, and selling them through his shell company. The proceeds flowed back to her hidden account, where they accumulated until there was enough to fund. What? That's when Brenda found the Costa Rica connection. It was a real estate listing. A house on the Pacific coast, in a town called Uvita. 3 bedrooms, ocean view, private beach access, tropical garden. The kind of place that looked like a postcard, like a dream someone had about retirement and escape. Listed price, $475,000. Buyer, V.L. Harrison. Purchase date, 6 months ago. The house was already furnished. Someone had been making trips to Costa Rica, buying furniture, setting up utilities, preparing for a new life. Vanessa was planning to leave. Not just leave, disappear. To a country with no extradition treaty with the United States, where my money would fund her new existence with Derek. And I'd been helping her do it. Every hour I worked, every deal I closed, every dollar I earned. All of it was feeding the machine that would eventually destroy me. That night I went home and looked at my wife differently. She was cooking dinner when I walked in. A homemade pasta sauce she'd been perfecting for years. The kitchen smelled like garlic and tomatoes, and she smiled when she saw me. "You're early," she said. "That's a nice surprise. Light day at work. Want some wine? I just opened a bottle." "Sure." She poured 2 glasses, handed me one, and went back to stirring the sauce. I watched her move around the kitchen, familiar, comfortable, graceful, the woman I'd married, the woman I'd loved, the woman who was planning to disappear with $500,000 of my money. "You okay?" she asked. "You seem distracted." "Just tired, long week." "You work too hard." She walked over, kissed me on the cheek. "But that's what I love about you. You're dedicated, dependable." Predictable, I thought. easy to deceive. Thanks, I said. Dinner smells great. We ate together like nothing was wrong. We talked about her charity work, about my construction projects, about the weather and the news and a movie she wanted to see. Normal conversation, normal evening, normal life. Except none of it was normal. None of it was real. After dinner, I told her I needed to do some work in my home office. She said she understood, kissed me again, and went upstairs to read. I sat at my desk for an hour, staring at the wall, thinking about everything I'd learned. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. I wasn't just going to catch Vanessa. I was going to make her confess. The breakthrough came 3 days later. I'd been reviewing Brenda's latest reports when she called with news. "I found something you need to hear," she said. Her voice was tense, urgent. "Can you come to my office now?" "I'm on my way." When I arrived, Brenda had her computer screen turned toward me. On it was a video file, security footage from Derek's storage unit, the one he maintained separately from Vanessa's. "Ray came through again," she said. "Derek has a unit at the secure space in Independence, Unit 312. He accesses it every few days, usually in the evening, after normal business hours." "What did you find?" Brenda hit play. The footage showed Derek entering the facility, walking down a hallway, unlocking his unit. The camera angle was poor. You could see him go in, but not much of what he did inside. He stayed for about 15 minutes, then emerged carrying a cardboard box. "That's not the interesting part," Brenda said. "This is." She fast-forwarded to another timestamp. Different day, different time. Derek was back at his unit, but this time he was on the phone. The storage facility didn't have audio, but the video clearly showed him talking, gesturing, pacing back and forth. "I had a lip reader analyze this," Brenda said. "Someone I've worked with before. Very accurate." She handed me a transcript. I read it, and my hands started to shake. The transcript was partial. The lip reader couldn't catch everything, but what was there was damning. "Derek, the next batch is ready. 4 pieces, one's a Rolex, estate jewelry." Inaudible. "Derek. He still doesn't know. Been distracted with work. Same as always." Inaudible. "Derek. 2 more months, maybe 3. She wants to wait until after the holidays. Less suspicious." Inaudible. "Derek. Costa Rica. Everything's set. House is ready. Bank accounts are open. We just need to liquidate the last of the big items. And we're gone." Inaudible. "Derek. He'll probably figure it out eventually. But by then, who cares? We'll be on a beach, and he'll be explaining to his lawyer." I set down the transcript. "There's more," Brenda said. She handed me another page. New phone call, different day. "Derek. The life insurance." Inaudible appears to be answering a question. "Derek. It's handled. 2 million policy. She's the sole beneficiary." Inaudible. "Derek. I'm not saying we do anything. I'm just saying it's there. An option. If things go wrong." I stopped reading. My hands weren't just shaking anymore. My whole body was trembling. Life insurance. I'd taken out that policy 5 years ago, when the company had its best year and Vanessa convinced me we needed better coverage. "What if something happens to you?" she'd said, curled up next to me on the couch. "I need to know I'll be okay. I know it's morbid to think about, but that's what marriage is. Planning for the future, even the parts we don't want to think about." I'd agreed. Of course I'd agreed. It made sense. It was responsible. It was what husbands did. $2 million. Sole beneficiary. "Marcus?" Brenda's voice seemed to come from far away. Are you okay? She's planning to kill me, I said. The words felt strange in my mouth. Absurd. Impossible, like lines from a bad movie. They're actually planning to kill me. We don't know that for certain. The transcript says an option. That could mean a lot of things. What else could it mean? Brenda didn't answer. She didn't have to. I sat in her office for a long time, the transcript in my hands, the words burning into my brain. An option, if things go wrong. I thought about going to the police. I thought about confronting Vanessa directly. I thought about a lot of things in the hours and days after I read that transcript. But in the end, I decided to do something else. I decided to set a trap. Not because I wanted revenge, although I did. Not because I wanted justice, although I wanted that too. I decided to set a trap because it was the only way to make sure they couldn't run. The only way to expose them publicly, completely, irreversibly. The only way to make sure they would never do this to anyone else. And maybe, just maybe, the only way to keep myself alive. The trap had 3 components. First, the venue. I needed a public setting where Vanessa and Derek would feel confident enough to expose themselves. Somewhere with witnesses, somewhere with recordings, somewhere that would provide maximum impact when the truth came out. Second, the bait. I needed to give them something irresistible, a prize so valuable that they'd accelerate their timeline, take risks they wouldn't normally take, make mistakes that could be documented. Third, the lock. I needed to ensure they couldn't run once the trap was sprung. Accounts frozen, passports flagged, every escape route closed before they even knew they were being watched. Each component required precision, and I had help. The venue was the easiest part. Every January, Web Construction held an annual gala for clients, partners, and employees. It was our biggest event of the year. 300 people, black tie, at the Grand Hall in downtown Kansas City. A chance to celebrate the previous year's successes, announce new projects, and strengthen relationships with the people who mattered. This year's gala was scheduled for January 18th, 3 weeks away. The timing couldn't have been better. I called my event coordinator, a woman named Patricia who'd been handling the gala for years. I want to make some changes to this year's program, I said. Of course. What did you have in mind? I want to do something special, a tribute to Vanessa. She's been such a partner to me over the years, supporting the business, managing our social calendar, contributing to the community. I've never really recognized that publicly. Patricia was delighted. That's a wonderful idea, Marcus. What specifically are you thinking? A presentation, video montage of our life together. Then a few words from me, and at the end, a surprise gift, something meaningful. What kind of gift? I smiled into the phone. A ring, her engagement ring. She lost the original a couple years ago. Never told me, didn't want me to feel bad about it. But I found out. I've had a replacement made. The exact same ring. I want to present it to her in front of everyone. Oh, Marcus. Patricia's voice actually broke a little. That's the most romantic thing I've ever heard. She's going to be overwhelmed. That's the idea. The bait came next. 3 weeks before the gala, I made an announcement at dinner. I've been thinking, I said, topping off Vanessa's wine glass. The company's doing better than ever. Record year. I was thinking maybe it's time we did something for ourselves. Vanessa looked up from her plate. What do you mean? A trip. A real one. Not just a long weekend somewhere. Something significant. A couple of weeks. I was thinking about Costa Rica. I watched her face with every ounce of attention I had. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't show even a flicker of surprise or recognition. Instead, she smiled, that warm, familiar smile that had fooled me for 12 years. "Costa Rica?" she said. "That sounds wonderful. What made you think of that?" "I've been reading articles about it. Beautiful beaches, great weather, reasonable cost of living. Some people are even buying property down there. Retiring early, living the dream." A tiny flicker in her eyes. So small, so quick. I almost missed it. "Property?" she repeated. "Just something I read. Probably too complicated, foreign real estate laws, all that. But the trip could be nice. Maybe February, after things calm down from the gala." Vanessa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'd love that. It's been so long since we took a real vacation. You deserve it." I squeezed back. "We both do." That night, after Vanessa went to bed, I reviewed the footage from the hidden cameras Brenda had helped me install. At 11:47 p.m., Vanessa had gotten up, gone to the bathroom, and made a phone call. "He knows about Costa Rica," she whispered into the phone. "He mentioned it at dinner, specifically mentioned people buying property there." A pause while the other person responded. "No, I don't think he actually knows about the house. He would have said something. He's not subtle enough to drop hints, but it's a strange coincidence." Another pause. "Maybe we should accelerate. The gala is in 3 weeks. If something were to happen during that time frame, it would look suspicious." But after, I watched her pace in the bathroom, phone pressed to her ear, whispering plans with the man who was helping her destroy me. After. They were planning something for after the gala. The lock was the most complicated piece of the trap. To ensure Vanessa and Derek couldn't escape, I needed to immobilize their resources before they even knew I was onto them. That meant legal intervention, court orders, asset freezes, passport flags. This is where Paula Whitmore came in. Paula was an attorney Brenda had recommended, a partner at Whitmore and Associates, specializing in complex financial fraud and asset recovery. She'd worked cases involving offshore accounts, hidden real estate, and systematic theft. She'd taken down corporate executives and corrupt officials and career criminals who thought they were untouchable. "She's the best in the Midwest," Brenda had said. "If anyone can lock down your wife's escape routes, it's Paula." I met Paula at her office on the Country Club Plaza, a corner suite with windows overlooking the shops and fountains below. She was in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and a handshake that meant business. I told her everything: the ring, the fakes, the hidden accounts, the storage units, Derek, the lip reader transcript, the life insurance comment, the Costa Rica house. She listened without interrupting, her pen moving steadily across a legal pad. When I finished, she set down the pen and looked at me with eyes that had seen worse. "Mr. Webb, you've assembled an impressive evidentiary record. The documentation you have would be sufficient for criminal charges against both your wife and Mr. Pruitt. Have you considered going directly to the police?" "I have. But I want something more than arrests." "More?" "I want them exposed publicly. I want everyone in this community to see who they really are. Not just the judge and jury, but everyone they've ever fooled. And I want to make sure they can't disappear before that happens." Paula studied me for a long moment. "You're talking about orchestrating a controlled disclosure, using the gala as a public forum." "Yes. That's legally complex. If done improperly, it could complicate any subsequent criminal prosecution. But if done carefully, can it be done carefully? Paula almost smiled. Mr. Webb, I've spent 30 years learning how to navigate legal gray areas. Let me tell you what's possible. Over the next 2 weeks, Paula and I built the legal framework for my trap. First, she filed an emergency petition with the court, requesting a temporary restraining order and asset freeze. The petition detailed everything: the hidden accounts, the shell company, the stolen jewelry, the Costa Rica property, the life insurance comments. It was sealed to prevent Vanessa from being tipped off, but it established a legal basis for what would come next. The judge reviewed the petition, found sufficient evidence of fraud and potential flight risk, and signed the order. Vanessa's accounts, all the ones under V.L. Harrison, were frozen. She wouldn't know until she tried to access them. Second, Paula coordinated with federal authorities. The life insurance comment elevated the investigation from simple fraud to potential conspiracy. The FBI opened a preliminary case file and agreed to have agents on standby. Third, she worked with the State Department and border agencies. Flags were placed on both Vanessa's and Derek's passports. If either of them tried to board an international flight, they'd be stopped at the airport and detained for questioning. Fourth, and this was the most delicate part, Paula coordinated with local law enforcement for the gala itself. Plainclothes detectives would be positioned throughout the venue, ready to make arrests once the disclosure happened. "You need to understand the risks," Paula told me during our final meeting before the gala. "Once you make this public, there's no going back. Your marriage, your reputation, your personal life, all of it will be exposed. Media attention will be intense. People will talk. Some of them will blame you." Blame me for what? Being deceived? For not seeing it sooner? For trusting your wife? People have a way of blaming victims. Makes them feel safer, like it couldn't happen to them. I thought about that. "I'd rather have the truth," I said finally. "Whatever comes with it." Paula nodded. "Then let's make sure the truth is undeniable." The gala was held on a Saturday night. 300 guests, black tie, crystal chandeliers catching the light and throwing rainbows across the ceiling, white tablecloths, silver centerpieces, a string quartet playing Vivaldi in the corner. I arrived early to oversee the final preparations. The video team was set up and ready. The sound equipment had been tested twice. Security personnel, a mix of hired guards and plainclothes police, were positioned at every entrance and exit. Everything was in place. Vanessa arrived at 6:30, stunning in a burgundy gown I'd never seen before. She'd had her hair done, her makeup professionally applied. She looked beautiful, genuinely, heartbreakingly beautiful. For a moment, looking at her, I felt a wave of something I didn't expect. Grief. Not for who she was. I knew now that the woman I thought I'd married had never existed, but for who I'd believed she was, for the life I'd thought we were building, for the future that would never happen. "You look amazing," I said. She smiled, that familiar smile, and kissed me on the cheek. "So do you. Are you nervous?" "A little. It's a big night." "The biggest." She squeezed my hand. "But we've got this. We always do." "We." The word felt like a knife. The evening began like every other gala. Cocktail hour, networking, the usual mingling and small talk. I moved through the crowd on autopilot, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, playing the role I'd played for so many years. At 8:30, the program began. I took the stage to welcome everyone. Thanked my team, my clients, my partners. Highlighted the year's achievements, the projects completed, the contracts signed, the community impact. Announced plans for the coming year. The audience applauded in all the right places. Normal gala, normal night. Then I said, "Before we move on to dinner, I'd like to take a few minutes to recognize someone very special." The screen behind me lit up with a photograph. Vanessa and me on our wedding day, standing under an arch of white flowers. 12 years ago, I made the best decision of my life. I married this woman. Applause rippled through the room. I saw Vanessa's face in the crowd, smiling, modest, perfectly playing the part of the honored wife. Vanessa has been my partner in every sense of the word. She supported me through the hard years, celebrated with me during the good ones, and made every day better just by being part of it. More photos appeared on the screen. Vacations we'd taken, charity events she'd organized, holiday dinners with friends and family, the life we'd built, or the life I'd thought we'd built. I wanted to do something special tonight, a tribute, because sometimes we don't say the things we should say to the people we love. The room was quiet now. 300 people watching, waiting. Vanessa, could you come up here?" She hesitated, just for a moment, so brief that most people probably didn't notice. But I noticed. Then she smiled, stood up from her table and walked to the stage. She stood beside me, taking my hand, the picture of a devoted wife. "I have a surprise for you," I said into the microphone. "Something I've been working on for months." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a ring box. The audience murmured appreciatively. This was the romantic gesture they'd been hoping for, the kind of moment that would be talked about for weeks. 12 years ago, I gave you a ring, I said. A ring that meant everything to me, that represented everything I hoped our life would become. And somewhere along the way, that ring got lost. Vanessa's smile flickered, almost imperceptibly. "You never told me," I continued. "You didn't want me to feel bad about it, but I found out anyway." I opened the ring box. Inside was a ring. It looked identical to the original. The same cut, the same setting, the same platinum band. But it wasn't the original. This ring was brand new. I'd bought it from Gerald Hoffman 2 weeks ago, a perfect match to the one I'd purchased 12 years before. The same design, the same quality, the same price. Real, unlike everything else in my marriage. "So I had it remade," I said. "The exact same ring, the same stone, the same setting, and I want to give it to you now, in front of everyone who matters to us." The audience began to applaud, but I wasn't finished. "And before you put it on," I said, my voice cutting through the applause, "there's something else I want to share with everyone." The applause faded. The room went quiet. Vanessa's face changed. Something was wrong. She could feel it now, could sense that this wasn't going the way it was supposed to go. "When I found out the original ring was missing," I said, "I asked my wife what happened to it. She said she'd lost it, taken it off while gardening, or misplaced it somewhere in the house. An accident. These things happen." I turned to look at her. Her eyes were wide now, uncertain. But then I got a phone call from the jeweler who sold me that ring 12 years ago. He called to tell me that my wife had tried to sell an engagement ring at his store, a ring she claimed was a family heirloom from a deceased aunt. The room was absolutely silent now, 300 people holding their breath. And he told me something else. The ring she brought in wasn't real. It was a fake, a cubic zirconia in a plated setting, worth maybe $200. I pulled out the fake ring, the one Gerald had kept safe for me, and held it up. "This is the ring she tried to sell, a fake, a substitute for the real ring I bought her, which was worth over $60,000. Vanessa tried to pull her hand away. I held on. "Where's the real ring, Vanessa?" I asked, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "Where's the ring I gave you on our wedding day?" "Marcus, this isn't—" "You're confused." "I'm not confused." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. "I have documentation, appraisals, bank records, everything." I handed her the first document. "This is an appraisal report from a certified gemologist. It confirms that every piece of jewelry I've ever given you, the pendant, the earrings, the bracelet, the necklace, has been replaced with fakes. The originals are gone. Sold." Gasps from the audience. "This," I continued, pulling another paper, "is a bank statement from an account under the name V.L. Harrison, your maiden name. Current balance, over $200,000. Deposits traced to sales of jewelry and other valuables over the past 5 years." Vanessa's face had gone white. She tried to step back, but I didn't let go of her hand. "And this," I said, pulling a final document, "is a real estate listing. A house in Costa Rica, purchased 6 months ago by V.L. Harrison, fully furnished, ready for occupancy." I let the words hang in the air. "Your escape plan," I said. "Yours and Derek's." The name echoed through the silent ballroom. "Derek Pruitt," I continued, turning to address the room. "Some of you might remember him. He stayed with us a few years back. My wife's cousin," she said. "Except he's not her cousin. He's her partner, her accomplice. The man who's been helping her systematically steal from me for half a decade." I turned back to Vanessa. "And according to a recording I obtained, you've been discussing the life insurance policy I took out. The one that names you as the sole beneficiary. The one worth $2 million. The one Derek called an option if things went wrong." Vanessa's mouth opened, but no words came out. "How long were you going to wait, Vanessa? Until after the gala? Until after our trip to Costa Rica? Until you found a convenient way to make something happen to me?" I would never." "You never what?" I released her hand and stepped back. "Never lied to me? Never stole from me? Never made plans to disappear with my money?" I looked out at the audience. Hundreds of faces, shocked and horrified and riveted. "I loved this woman," I said. "I trusted her with everything I had, and in return, she spent 12 years planning to destroy me." 2 detectives stepped forward from the edge of the room. One of them approached Vanessa. "Mrs. Webb," he said quietly, "you need to come with us." For a moment, she didn't move. She just stood there, frozen, the burgundy gown suddenly looking less elegant than it had an hour ago. Then she turned to me. "You were never supposed to find out," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the microphone picked it up. Everyone heard. "I know," I said. She looked at me one last time, and for just a moment, I thought I saw something human in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or just the knowledge that she'd finally lost. Then the detectives led her away. The aftermath was chaos. Guests were murmuring, some crying, some rushing to the exits. The gala had transformed from a celebration into a crime scene. Derek had been waiting in his car in the parking lot, ready to receive Vanessa's signal. 2 plainclothes detectives had approached his vehicle and detained him without incident. He hadn't even tried to run. Paula Whitmore stepped onto the stage beside me and helped calm the crowd, explaining that what they'd witnessed was the culmination of a fraud investigation and that law enforcement had everything under control. I stood there through all of it, the questions, the condolences, the shock, feeling strangely empty. I'd planned this moment for weeks. I'd imagined the satisfaction of exposing her, the vindication of proving what she'd done. I'd expected to feel something like victory. Instead, I felt hollow. 12 years. 12 years of my life, given to someone who had never existed. The next morning, the news broke. Contractor exposes wife's fraud scheme at black tie gala. Within hours, it was national news. Every outlet ran the story: the hidden accounts, the fake jewelry, the Costa Rica escape plan, the life insurance implications. The video from the gala leaked somehow, and soon everyone could watch the moment I confronted her. The look on her face when she realized it was over. The coverage was relentless, sympathetic mostly. I was portrayed as the hard-working victim of a sophisticated con artist, but also invasive. Reporters camped outside my house. My phone rang constantly. Business associates called with condolences and curiosity. I let Paula and Brenda handle most of it. I wasn't interested in being a celebrity victim. I just wanted to move on. The legal proceedings took months. Vanessa, or Victoria, as her true identity was now public knowledge, was charged with multiple counts of fraud, theft, and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, jewelry appraisals, storage unit footage, the lip reader transcript, the Costa Rica property records. Her defense tried to argue that I had been a willing participant in her spending, that the gifts I'd given her were hers to do with as she pleased. It didn't fly. The systematic replacement of valuables with fakes, the hidden accounts, the escape plan, all of it pointed to deliberate, long-term fraud. Derek pled guilty early, hoping for leniency. He received 5 years in federal prison and agreed to testify against Vanessa. Her trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all counts. 17 charges, 12 years in federal prison. Full restitution ordered, though there wasn't much left to restore. Most of the money had already been spent on the Costa Rica house and other expenses. I didn't attend the sentencing. I'd already said everything I needed to say. 3 months after the trial ended, I sold the house in Prairie Village. I couldn't live there anymore. Every room held memories that had turned poisonous. The kitchen where we'd had dinner 1,000 times. The bedroom where we'd slept side by side. The bathroom where I'd watched surveillance footage of her whispering to Derek. I found a place outside the city. A farmhouse on 12 acres, with a barn I converted into a workshop. Quiet land, old trees, a creek that ran along the edge of the property. The kind of place where you could hear yourself think. I spent weekends building furniture. Tables, chairs, bookshelves, nothing fancy. Just solid pieces made from good wood. The work reminded me of where I'd started, back when I was hauling lumber and learning to trust my hands. There's something healing about building things, something that puts the world back in order. One evening, about a year after the gala, I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset when my phone rang. Megan, my daughter. We'd gotten closer since everything happened. She'd flown in during the trial, stayed for 2 weeks, helped me sort through the wreckage of my life. She'd been angry at first, not at me, but at herself, for not seeing what Vanessa was doing. "I should have noticed," she'd said once, crying in my kitchen. "I should have protected you." "You couldn't have known," I told her. "None of us could." Now she called every few weeks, checking in, making sure I was okay. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, kiddo, how's Seattle?" "Rainy. How's Kansas?" "Also rainy. Some things don't change." She laughed. That laugh had always made everything seem a little more bearable. We talked for a while. Her job, her apartment, the guy she'd been seeing for a few months. Normal conversation, the kind you have when you've made it through something hard and come out the other side. Then she got quiet. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "How did you stay so calm through everything?" The investigation, the gala, the trial, I would have fallen apart. But you just kept going, kept building the case, kept holding it together. How? I thought about that for a long time. I learned something a long time ago, I said finally. When I was first starting the company, I had a project go wrong, really wrong. Foundation cracked, walls started shifting, the whole building was at risk of coming down. I was 26 years old, and I thought my career was over. What happened? I panicked. I yelled at my crew, blamed everyone else, made the situation worse. And then an old-timer named Joe took me aside and said something I never forgot. He said, "Marcus, the building doesn't care that you're scared. The problem doesn't care that you're angry. The only thing that matters is what you do next." Megan was quiet, listening. I realized he was right. Emotions are real, but they don't solve problems. The only thing that solves problems is action. Calm, deliberate, systematic action. Gather information, make a plan, execute the plan, deal with what's actually in front of you, not what you're feeling about it. That's how you handled Vanessa. That's how I handled Vanessa. I felt everything. The betrayal, the anger, the fear, but I didn't let it drive my decisions. I stayed calm. I gathered evidence. I built a case. And when the time was right, I executed. Do you regret it? Being so controlled, I mean? Sometimes I think if I'd been in your position, I would have wanted to scream at her, shake her, make her understand what she'd done. I understand the impulse, I said. But screaming doesn't get you anywhere. It just gives the other person ammunition. The best revenge isn't yelling, it's winning. And winning means being smarter, calmer, and more prepared than the person who's trying to hurt you. The business continued to grow. Web construction expanded into 2 more states, hired another 60 employees, took on projects I never would have imagined possible when I was sleeping on job sites and counting every penny. I stepped back from day-to-day operations, brought in a CEO I trusted, focused on the big-picture decisions. I had good people now, people who'd been with me for years, who'd proven their loyalty through the scandal and the trial. I trusted them. Not blindly, not the way I'd trusted Vanessa, but thoughtfully, with verification and accountability and clear expectations. Trust, I'd learned, wasn't about faith. It was about evidence. 2 years after the gala, I got a letter. It came to my office, forwarded from the old address in Prairie Village. Plain white envelope, no return address, postmarked from a federal correctional facility in Texas. I knew what it was before I opened it. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten in neat, precise script. "Marcus, I know you probably won't read this. You have every reason to throw it away. But I've had a lot of time to think in here, and there are things I need to say, even if you never hear them. I'm not going to apologize. Not because I don't regret what I did, I do, but because an apology from me would be meaningless. Words are easy. They were always easy for me. That was the problem. What I want you to know is this: it wasn't personal. What I did to you, I'd done before to other people in other places. It was what I knew how to do. The only thing I knew how to do. That sounds like an excuse. It's not. It's just the truth. I grew up with nothing, less than nothing. My father was a con man who disappeared when I was 6. My mother was an addict who sold everything we had to feed her habit. By the time I was 16, I'd learned that the only way to survive was to take what you needed from people who had more than you. Derek and I started running scams when I was 19. Small stuff at first. Fake charity drives, phantom car repairs, lonely heart schemes. We got good at it. Good enough that by my 20s, I could walk into a room and know within 5 minutes who was vulnerable, who could be convinced, who would give me what I wanted. You were different. You weren't lonely or desperate or broken. You were successful and confident and smart. But you were also trusting, genuinely trusting in a way that most people aren't. You wanted to believe the best about people. That made you a mark. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because you deserve to understand what happened. The plan was always temporary. Get in, extract as much as possible, get out before you noticed. 2 years, maybe 3. But you were so oblivious, so focused on your work, so convinced that everything was fine, that I kept pushing the timeline. Another year, another 100,000, just a little more. By the time I realized I should have left years ago, I was in too deep. The Costa Rica house, the escape fund, the insurance policy, it all made sense at the time. It was supposed to be my retirement, my freedom. I never planned to hurt you, not physically. The insurance thing, that was Derek's idea, and I shut it down. We argued about it. He said it was just backup, just in case, but I knew what he really meant. I told him no. You probably don't believe that. I don't blame you. But it's true. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that somewhere, under all the lies and the schemes and the masks I wore, there was a person who saw who you really were. You were a good man, Marcus, kind, generous, hard-working. The life you built it with your hands and your heart, and you did it honestly. That's rare. Rarer than you know. I'm sorry I couldn't be someone who deserved you. I'm sorry I took so much from you. And I'm sorry that the only way I knew how to survive was by hurting people who didn't deserve to be hurt. Maybe someday, when I get out of here, I'll find another way to live. Maybe not. I don't know what the future holds, but I wanted you to know that I think about you, that I remember the good parts, the real parts, even if they were smaller than they should have been. Take care of yourself. Build something beautiful with what you have left. Victoria. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it up, put it back in the envelope, and threw it in the trash. She wanted absolution, understanding, some sign that the connection between us had been real, even if everything else was fake. I couldn't give her that. Maybe there was a kernel of truth in what she'd written. Maybe she really had seen something in me that she valued. Maybe the life insurance thing really had been Derek's idea. It didn't matter. The truth was simple. She'd made choices. Every day for 12 years, she'd woken up and chosen to deceive me. She could have stopped at any point, could have come clean, walked away, built a different life. She didn't. Whatever sadness she felt, whatever regret, it didn't undo what she'd done. And no letter, no matter how eloquent, could change that. 3 years after the gala, I met someone. Her name was Claire. She was a landscape architect, 51 years old, divorced with 2 grown children. We met at a farmer's market. She was buying tomatoes, I was buying corn, and somehow we ended up talking for an hour about the best way to grow basil. She had a laugh that could fill a room. And she looked at me like I was real. Not a mark, not a project, not someone to be figured out. Just a person. I told her everything on our 3rd date. The whole story, Vanessa, Derek, the ring, the gala, the trial. I watched her face as I talked, waiting for the moment when she'd pull back, decide I was too much baggage, too much risk. It didn't come. That's a lot, she said when I finished. I know, and I understand if I wasn't finished. She reached across the table and took my hand. That's a lot for one person to go through. But here's what I noticed. You went through it. You survived. You're sitting here with me, willing to be honest about it, willing to trust again. That takes something. Something I admire. Or I'm just foolish. Maybe we're both foolish. She smiled. But I've always thought foolishness was underrated.